I didn't mean it to land the way it did. It was a joke. A careless, half-second comment that slipped out during a lazy Friday night. The kind of thing you don't think twice about until the room goes quiet. My husband Marcus and I were sitting in the living room, scrolling on our phones, half watching a movie neither of us cared about. We'd been married 6 years. Comfortable. Predictable. Maybe a little too comfortable. Earlier that evening, Marcus's friend Jason had stopped by to drop off some tools. He stayed maybe 10 minutes. Old guy. Confident. Loud laugh. The kind of man who fills space without trying. After he left, Marcus made some comment about how Jason had been bragging at the gym again, flexing like always. I laughed and said without thinking, "Well, I guess he has a lot to be confident about." Marcus raised an eyebrow, smirked and said, "What's that supposed to mean?" I shrugged, smiling, and added the line that changed everything. "You know, some guys are just bigger." I expected him to roll his eyes, maybe make a joke back. Instead, Marcus turned toward me slowly, his smile gone. His voice was calm, almost too calm, when he said, "How do you know?" It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was precise. Surgical. Like he already knew the answer and was daring me to lie. If that question hit you in the chest the way it hit me, you already understand what that moment felt like. If you've ever been in a relationship where one sentence changed the air in the room, hit like and share this so the story reaches people who've lived it too. I laughed it off at first. Relax. It was just a joke. Marcus didn't laugh. He stared at me, waiting. That's when I realized I'd crossed into territory I couldn't joke my way out of. He leaned back on the couch and said, "No, Evelyn. You don't just randomly say something like that. So I'll ask again. How do you know?" My mouth opened, then closed. The truth was messy. Not because I'd slept with Jason. I hadn't. But because the answer wasn't innocent either. Years ago, before Marcus and I met, Jason and I had briefly talked. Nothing serious. Few dates. A few nights that never quite turned into anything. Fizzled out fast and we both moved on. When Marcus introduced me to Jason early in our relationship, neither of us said anything. Felt unnecessary. Harmless. Ancient history. Until it wasn't. I told Marcus the truth, or at least most of it. I said, "We went out once a long time ago. That's all." He nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the TV like it suddenly mattered. "And you thought it was funny to compare us?" he asked. That's when the weight of it sank in. This wasn't about size. It was about respect. Comparison. The one thing men don't want to feel inside their own marriage. Marcus stood up and said he needed air. He grabbed his jacket and walked out without another word. The door clicked shut behind him, and the silence that followed was loud enough to make my ears ring. At this point in the story, I want to know something. If you were Marcus, would you have walked out too? Drop a comment and just type left or stayed. He didn't come back that night. He didn't text. Barely slept. My mind replayed that moment over and over, searching for a version where I kept my mouth shut. When Marcus finally came home the next afternoon, he looked different. Not angry. Controlled. Distant. He said, "We need to talk tonight." No jokes. No deflection. I nodded, my stomach tight. That evening, he asked questions I hadn't prepared for. Why I felt comfortable making that joke. Why Jason's name came up at all. Whether I'd ever compared Marcus to anyone else. Each question felt calm, but underneath was something sharper. Hurt mixed with pride. When I told him I'd never cheated, he said, "That's not what I'm asking." That sentence scared me more than yelling would have. If this part of the story made you uncomfortable in a familiar way, comment one word. Respect. Let's see how many people understand what's really at stake here. Marcus told me something then that I wasn't ready to hear. He said, "When you joke like that, you tell me I'm competing in my own marriage. And I don't compete for my wife." He wasn't accusing me. He was drawing a line. I realized I'd never thought about jokes the way he did. To me, words faded. To him, they stayed. We went to bed that night on opposite sides of the mattress, backs turned, a space between us that felt wider than the room. I stared at the ceiling, realizing that one careless sentence had exposed cracks I didn't know were there. And I didn't yet understand that what came next would force both of us to decide what kind of marriage we were really in. The next few days felt heavier than the argument itself. Marcus wasn't cold, but he wasn't warm either. He still went to work, still asked if I'd eaten, still said goodnight. But the ease was gone. The casual touches, jokes, the way he used to pull me close without thinking. It was like I'd dented something that couldn't be smoothed out with time alone. On the third night, he finally said what he'd been holding back. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the house quiet, the kind of quiet that invites hard conversations. He said, "I've been replaying that moment. Not the joke. The confidence behind it." I asked him what he meant. He looked at me and said, "You didn't sound unsure. You sounded certain." That hit me harder than his first question. I tried to explain. I told him I wasn't comparing him, that it had been stupid, careless, rooted in nothing but a passing thought. He listened. Then he said something that shifted the ground under both of us. "I don't think you meant to hurt me, but I think you forgot what marriage protects." He explained that marriage isn't just loyalty in actions. It's loyalty in perspective, in how you speak, in what you entertain even as a joke. I realized then that I'd been treating safety like it was automatic. Like 6 years together meant we were immune to damage. Marcus wasn't asking for reassurance. He was asking for respect without conditions. Not because he was insecure, but because he didn't want to slowly become someone who questioned his place in his own home. That night, I told him the full truth. Not just about Jason, but about the part of me that had grown too casual, too comfortable, too careless with boundaries. I admitted I hadn't thought about how words linger longer for men who don't show their wounds. Marcus didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said, "Thank you for saying it out loud." Then he added, "But understand this. If I ever feel like I'm being measured against another man again, even indirectly, I won't fight for this. I'll step away." That scared me more than any argument could have. Not because he was threatening to leave, but because he sounded certain of himself. Grounded. A man who knew where his line was and wouldn't redraw it for comfort. I saw him clearly in that moment, not as my husband, but as a man who respected himself enough to walk away if he had to. Over the next few weeks, something unexpected happened. We didn't just return to normal. We became more deliberate. Conversations slowed down. Jokes softened. Compliments meant more. Marcus opened up in ways he hadn't before, talking about the pressure men carry to be enough without ever asking if they are. And I learned something uncomfortable about myself. That intention doesn't erase impact. And love doesn't excuse carelessness. Jason eventually faded back into the background where he belonged. Marcus never asked me to cut him off. He didn't need to. The shift came from me. From understanding that marriage isn't about avoiding temptation. It's about not inviting it into the room disguised as humor. Months later, Marcus told me something quietly one night. He said that when he asked, "How do you know?" he wasn't fishing for a confession. He was checking whether I still saw him as the standard. Not the comparison. The reference point. Hearing that made my chest ache in a way I didn't expect. Because I realized how close I'd come to answering that question wrong in ways that couldn't be undone. We stayed together. Stronger but not careless. And I don't tell that story because it ended well. I tell it because it almost didn't. Because sometimes damage doesn't come from betrayal. Comes from forgetting what your words represent to the person who chose you. If you've made it this far, you already know this isn't about size, jokes, or another man. It's about awareness. About how quickly comfort can turn into entitlement. And how respect, once cracked, doesn't always announce when it's leaving. Before you go, do 3 things if this story resonated with you. Like the video so it reaches people who need to hear this perspective. Comment. Do you think jokes like this cross a line in marriage? Yes or no, and why? Subscribe if you want more real, uncomfortable relationship stories that don't sugarcoat the truth. Because sometimes the most dangerous moments in a relationship don't come from fights. They come from jokes that reveal too much.